In a quiet little town where everyone knew each other by name, lived a boy named Ethan. He was just 10 years old but had a heart full of courage and curiosity. Life wasn't always easy for him. He lost his dad when he was only 6, but his mom made sure they stayed strong together. She worked hard at the local hospital, juggling long shifts while still finding time to bake cookies or read bedtime stories to Ethan. To him, she wasn't just his mom. She was his hero. Things seemed to be looking up recently. After years of being on her own, his mom had started seeing someone new, a man who seemed kind, charming, and genuinely interested in taking care of them both. At first, Ethan liked him too. The guy would bring small gifts, tell funny jokes, and even help fix things around the house. But as the days went by, something about him didn't sit right with Ethan. It wasn't anything obvious, just tiny moments that felt off. One evening, 2 days before the wedding, Ethan was playing hide-and-seek inside their cozy home. His mom was busy cooking dinner, and this man, let's call him Mark, was working in his study. Ethan tiptoed past the closed door, trying not to make a sound. But then through the crack under the door he heard voices, not one voice but two. They were talking quietly, almost like they didn't want anyone else to hear. Curiosity got the better of him. Crouching low, Ethan pressed his ear against the wooden surface. What he heard next sent chills down his spine. One of the voices, it sounded like Mark, was saying things that didn't make sense. Words like control, plan, and she won't know until it's too late floated out into the hallway. Ethan froze. Who were they talking about? And what exactly were they planning? The conversation ended abruptly, leaving Ethan shaken. He crept back to his room, his mind racing. Was he imagining things? Maybe he misunderstood. Adults often said stuff kids didn't get, right? But deep down, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Really wrong. That night, sleep eluded him. Every time he closed his eyes, those words echoed in his head. Finally, he decided he couldn't keep this to himself anymore. No matter how scared he felt, he had to tell his mom. Even if she thought he was overreacting, he owed it to her to warn her. The next morning, Ethan found his mom in the kitchen. She was humming softly, flipping pancakes on the stove. Her face lit up when she saw him walk in. "Morning, champ. Ready for breakfast?" Ethan hesitated, clutching the edge of his shirt nervously. How could he say this without sounding silly? Taking a deep breath, he blurted out, "Mom, we need to talk." She turned off the stove and knelt beside him, concern etched on her face. "What is it, sweetheart? You look worried." For a moment, Ethan struggled to find the words. Then, in a rush, he told her everything. The strange voices, the unsettling phrases, and the knot of fear tightening in his chest. When he finished, he looked up at her, hoping she'd understand. At first, his mom chuckled lightly, ruffling his hair. "Oh, honey, I'm sure you misheard. Grown-ups sometimes talk about work or boring stuff like that." But Ethan shook his head fiercely. Tears welled up in his eyes as he pleaded, "Please, Mom, don't marry him. Something isn't right." Seeing her son so upset hit her harder than she expected. Sure, she trusted Mark, or at least she thought she did. But what if Ethan was onto something? Could she really ignore such a desperate plea from her own child? That nagging doubt in the back of her mind began to grow louder. Later that evening, she tried to casually bring up the topic with Mark. "Hey, I noticed you were on a call earlier. Everything okay?" she asked, watching his reaction closely. Mark smiled, though there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. "Oh yeah, just some work stress. Nothing to worry about." But Sarah wasn't convinced. That night, lying awake in bed, she replayed Ethan's words in her head. If he was willing to risk upsetting her to share this, it meant something. And as much as she hated to admit it, there had been moments lately where Mark acted differently. More secretive, more controlling. Had she missed the signs? Unbeknownst to either of them, this was only the beginning of unraveling a web far darker than they could have imagined. For now, though, all Sarah knew was that she needed answers, and fast. The morning after Ethan's plea, the house felt heavier than usual. The air seemed thick with unspoken tension, and even the cheerful chirping of birds outside couldn't lift the mood. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, poking at his cereal absent-mindedly. He kept glancing at his mom, trying to gauge her reaction. Did she believe him? Or did she think he was just being silly? His mom, on the other hand, was lost in thought. She hadn't slept well the night before. Every time she closed her eyes, Ethan's tearful face replayed in her mind. His words echoed too. Something isn't right. She wanted to dismiss it as a child's overactive imagination, but something inside her refused to let it go. What if he was right? What if there really was something off about the man she'd planned to marry? She tried to shake off the unease as she went through her daily routine, but the more she thought about it, the more certain moments stood out. Like the way he had subtly discouraged her from inviting some of her closest friends to the wedding, or how he always seemed to steer conversations away when she asked about his past. At the time, she had brushed it off as harmless quirks. Now, those little things felt like warning signs. Later that afternoon, while Ethan was playing in his room, she decided to test the waters. She casually brought up the topic again during one of their quiet moments together. "So," she said, sipping her tea, "you've been pretty busy lately, huh? How's work going?" He smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Oh, same old stuff. Just keeping things moving." She nodded, pressing gently. "It must be stressful. I noticed you were on a call yesterday. Everything okay?" For a split second, his smile faltered. Then he laughed lightly, waving a hand. Yeah, nothing major. Just some loose ends to tie up." But his tone, there was something in it. A hint of defensiveness, maybe even irritation. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make her stomach churn. She changed the subject quickly, not wanting to push too hard, but the seed of doubt had already taken root. That evening, Ethan found her sitting alone in the living room, staring blankly at the wall. He hesitated for a moment before walking over and sitting beside her. "Mom?" he asked softly. "Are you mad at me?" She blinked, snapping out of her thoughts. Turning to him, she forced a smile. "Of course not, sweetheart. Why would I be mad?" He shrugged, looking down at his hands. "I don't know. You seem different, like you're upset or something." Her heart melted at his concern. Pulling him close, she hugged him tightly. "I'm not upset with you, okay? In fact, I'm really proud of you for speaking up. It takes courage to say what you feel, especially when it's hard." Ethan looked up at her, his eyes wide with hope. "So, do you believe me?" she sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I don't know yet, but I promise I'll look into it. If there's anything wrong, we'll figure it out together." Relieved, Ethan nodded. For the first time since overhearing that strange conversation, he felt like they were on the same team again. But his mom's mind was racing. She knew she couldn't ignore this any longer. If Ethan was right, if there really was something dangerous lurking beneath the surface, she needed to act fast. The next day, she called an old colleague from the hospital. They had worked together years ago, and though they weren't particularly close, she trusted her judgment. After exchanging pleasantries, she got straight to the point. "Hey, listen, I need a favor. Can you help me run a background check on someone?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Sure, but why? Is everything okay?" She hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "It's probably nothing," she said finally. "But my son overheard something that made us both uneasy. I just want to be sure." Her colleague agreed to help, promising to send over whatever information she could find. As she hung up the phone, she felt a mix unbeknownst to either of them. This was only the beginning of unraveling a web far darker than they could have imagined. For now, though, all Sarah knew was that she needed answers, and fast. Over the next few days, everything seemed to move in slow motion. The mom couldn't shake off the uneasy feeling that had settled deep in her chest. Every time she looked at Ethan, she saw the worry still lingering in his eyes. It was clear he was holding on to what he'd overheard, and it broke her heart to see him so troubled. She knew she had to figure things out. not just for herself but for him too. She decided to pay closer attention to the man she was about to marry. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual. He was polite, helpful, and always quick with a smile. But as she observed more carefully, little cracks began to show. For instance, he often changed the subject whenever she asked about his family or past relationships. Once, when she jokingly asked if he'd kept in touch with any old friends, his cheerful demeanor faltered, and he quickly mumbled something about losing contact over the years before steering the conversation elsewhere. Then there was the way he acted around Ethan. Before, he had been warm and playful, even teasing the boy gently during meals. But now, he seemed impatient, almost annoyed whenever Ethan spoke up. One afternoon, while they were all sitting together in the living room, Ethan accidentally knocked over a glass of water. The man's reaction was immediate, and harsher than anyone expected. "Be careful," he snapped, his voice sharp enough to make Ethan flinch. The mom noticed how Ethan's face fell, and she quickly stepped in. "It's okay. Accidents happen," she said firmly, shooting the man a pointed look. He softened his tone, apologizing, and saying he was just stressed from work. But the damage was done. Ethan retreated to his room, clearly upset, and the mom felt a pang of guilt. Had she ignored signs like this before? Was she letting her excitement about starting a new chapter cloud her judgment? Determined to get answers, she waited anxiously for the information her colleague promised to send. In the meantime, she started doing some digging on her own. She casually asked questions here and there, pretending to be curious about wedding plans or future goals. One evening, while discussing finances, she mentioned updating her will. His reaction caught her off guard. He perked up instantly, asking detailed questions about her assets and retirement fund. When she joked about how much paperwork that would involve, he brushed it off, saying, "Better safe than sorry, right?" That comment stuck with her. Why was he so interested in her financial situation? She hadn't thought much of it earlier, chalking it up to practicality. Now, though, it felt suspicious. The pieces weren't adding up, and the more she learned, the more unsettled she became. Finally, the report arrived. Her colleague sent her an email late one night, attaching several documents. Sitting alone in her room, she opened the file with trembling hands. What she read left her breathless. The man she thought she knew wasn't who he claimed to be. His real name wasn't even close to what he'd told her. Worse, he had a history, multiple cases of fraud, manipulation, and even allegations of disappearing partners after gaining access to their money. Some of these cases dated back years, and though he'd never been convicted due to lack of evidence, the pattern was undeniable. Her mind raced as she scrolled through the details. There were interviews with former partners who described him as charming at first but increasingly controlling over time. One woman recounted how he isolated her from her friends and family, convincing her to sign over property deeds before vanishing without a trace. Another spoke of waking up one day to find him gone, along with most of her savings. As she closed the laptop, tears welled up in her eyes. How could she have been so blind? All those little moments she'd dismissed. The evasive answers, the sudden interest in her finances, the way he subtly pushed her away from people she trusted. They all made sense now. And worst of all, Ethan had been right all along. Her brave, observant boy had tried to warn her, and she had almost ignored him. The weight of the truth pressed down on her, making it hard to breathe. She realized she couldn't face this alone. She needed help, someone she could trust completely. Picking up her phone, she dialed her best friend's number. They had known each other since high school, through thick and thin, and she knew she could count on her no matter what. "Hey," she said quietly when her friend answered. "Can we talk? It's important." Her friend immediately picked up on the urgency in her voice. "Of course. What's going on?" Taking a deep breath, she explained everything, from Ethan's suspicions to the chilling discoveries in the report. By the end of the call, her friend was furious. "You can't stay there," she insisted. "This guy is dangerous. You need to protect yourself and Ethan." "I know," she whispered, her voice shaking. "But I don't know what to do." If I confront him, he might realize I'm onto him. And then what happens? Her friend thought for a moment before replying. We'll come up with a plan, together. But you need to act fast. Don't let him suspect anything. Hanging up, she felt a flicker of hope. She wasn't alone in this anymore. With her friend's support, she began preparing for what lay ahead. She packed a small bag with essentials, stashing it in the trunk of her car just in case. She also installed hidden cameras around the house, hoping to catch any incriminating behavior on tape. Each step terrified her, but she reminded herself why she was doing it: for Ethan, for her safety, and for the chance to start fresh. As the days passed, she grew more cautious, watching every move he made. Meanwhile, Ethan noticed the change in her demeanor. Gone was the uncertainty. Instead, she seemed focused, determined. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, he asked hesitantly, "Mom, are we okay?" She smiled, pulling him into a tight hug. "We're going to be fine, sweetheart, I promise." And for the first time in weeks, she truly believed it. The days leading up to the wedding were tense, but the mom did her best to keep things looking normal. On the surface, everything seemed fine. She went about her routine, smiled when needed, and acted like nothing was wrong. But inside, her mind was racing. Every second felt like an eternity, and every interaction with the man she had once trusted became a test of nerves. She knew she couldn't let him suspect anything, not yet. If he realized she was onto him, there was no telling what he might do. Ethan noticed the shift in her behavior too. His mom wasn't just worried anymore. She was cautious, almost like a detective in one of his favorite TV shows. He saw her sneaking around the house late at night, setting up small devices that looked like smoke detectors but weren't. Once, while passing by her room, he caught her whispering into the phone, her voice low and urgent. When she noticed him standing there, she quickly ended the call and smiled. "Just work stuff," she said, brushing it off. But Ethan wasn't fooled. He could tell something big was happening. Despite the tension, the wedding preparations continued. The invitations had been sent out, the venue booked, and the dress altered for the final fitting. To everyone else, it looked like a happy occasion. Friends and family called to congratulate her, gushing about how wonderful this new chapter would be. Each conversation left her feeling more conflicted. How could she explain the truth without sounding paranoid? And even if she did, who would believe her? Her best friend became her lifeline during this time. They spoke daily, sometimes multiple times a day, strategizing and planning their next steps. One evening, as they sat together in her kitchen, her friend leaned forward, eyes serious. "You can't wait until after the wedding," she said firmly. "If you do, you're giving him exactly what he wants. Access to your life, your money, everything." "I know," the mom replied, rubbing her temples. "But I don't want to jump the gun either. I need proof. Something concrete so no one can accuse me of making this up." Her friend nodded thoughtfully. "Okay, then we focus on gathering evidence, keep recording him, document every little thing, and in the meantime, we involve the authorities. You can't handle this alone." The mention of involving the police made her stomach churn. It felt like crossing a point of no return. But deep down, she knew her friend was right. This wasn't just about protecting herself. It was about stopping someone who could hurt others in the future. That night, she gathered all the information. She had the hidden camera footage, the background report, and notes from conversations where he'd slipped up, and sent them to a trusted contact in law enforcement. It was a risky move, but she hoped it would pay off. As the pieces fell into place, she also began preparing Ethan. She didn't want to scare him, but she needed him to understand that things might get intense soon. One afternoon, while they were baking cookies together, a rare moment of calm, she turned to him. "Ethan, remember how you told me something felt wrong?" He nodded, his expression turning serious. "Yeah. Are you still thinking about it?" "Yes," she admitted. "And I think you were right. There's something we need to take care of before the wedding. But I need you to promise me something. Okay? No matter what happens, stay close to me. Don't go anywhere without telling me first." Ethan frowned, sensing the gravity of her words. Is he going to hurt us? She hesitated, choosing her next words carefully. I don't know for sure, but I'm doing everything I can to make sure that doesn't happen. You're my brave boy, and I need you to trust me, all right? He nodded slowly, though fear flickered in his eyes. Okay, Mom, I'll be careful. With each passing day, the pressure mounted. The man grew increasingly agitated, snapping at minor inconveniences and complaining about last-minute wedding details. Once, when the caterer called to confirm the menu, he took the phone from her and argued loudly about unnecessary costs. She watched silently, her heart pounding. Was this part of his plan to drain her resources before disappearing? Or was he simply stressed? Either way, it only strengthened her resolve to act. 2 nights before the wedding, she staged a fight. It wasn't easy. She hated confrontation, but she knew it was necessary. Sitting across from him at the dining table, she deliberately brought up topics she knew would irritate him. I've been thinking, she said casually, maybe we should postpone the honeymoon. Money's tight, and I don't want to start our marriage with debt. His reaction was immediate. What are you talking about? He snapped, slamming his fork down. We've already planned everything. You can't back out now. She pressed further, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. I'm just saying maybe we should rethink some things, be smarter about our decisions. You're being ridiculous, he muttered, standing up abruptly. I need some air. With that, he stormed out of the house, leaving her alone with Ethan. As soon as the door slammed shut, she exhaled sharply, her hands trembling. Had she pushed too far? Would he come back angrier than before? She didn't have much time to dwell on it. Moments later, her phone buzzed, a message from her contact in law enforcement. They had reviewed the evidence and agreed to intervene. All she had to do now was wait. That night, as Ethan lay sleeping, she sat by his bedside, watching him breathe. Tears welled up in her eyes as she realized how close they had come to disaster. If it hadn't been for his courage, if he hadn't spoken up, they might have walked straight into a nightmare. Whispering softly, she kissed his forehead. Thank you for saving us, she murmured. I won't let anything happen to you, I promise. Outside, the world was quiet, unaware of the storm brewing within their home. Tomorrow would bring answers and hopefully closure. For now, she clung to hope, knowing that whatever happened, they would face it together. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear, but inside the house, the atmosphere was anything but calm. The mom woke up early, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. She glanced at Ethan, who was still asleep in his bed, his face peaceful despite everything that had been happening. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel grateful for him, for his bravery, his instincts, and the way he had refused to stay silent when something felt wrong. He was the reason they weren't walking blindly into danger. She moved quietly around the house, making sure everything was ready. The hidden cameras were in place, capturing every corner of the living room and kitchen. Her phone was fully charged, tucked into her pocket along with the number of the detective she'd been working with. She had already packed a small bag with essentials, clothes, important documents, and some cash, and stashed it in the trunk of her car. If things went sideways, she wanted to be prepared to leave at a moment's notice. As the hours passed, the tension grew thicker. The man returned home late the previous night after their staged argument, muttering under his breath about how unreasonable she was being. But today, on the day of the wedding, he seemed different, cooler, more distant. There was a sharpness in his eyes that made her uneasy, like he was calculating something. She tried to act normal, keeping her voice light as she asked if he needed help with his tie or if he wanted breakfast. He brushed her off, saying he wasn't hungry and that he'd take care of himself. Ethan stayed close to her side all morning, sensing the weight of the situation, even if he didn't fully understand it. At one point, he tugged on her sleeve and whispered, "Mom, is today the day?" She knelt down, meeting his gaze. "Yes, sweetheart. Today is the day we figure things out. Just remember what I told you, stay near me no matter what." He nodded solemnly, clutching her hand tightly. His presence gave her strength, reminding her why she was doing this. This wasn't just about protecting herself. It was about giving Ethan a safe future, free from lies and manipulation. By late afternoon, the final preparations were underway. Friends and family would start arriving soon, but the mom knew the authorities were planning to step in before the ceremony began. She had received confirmation earlier that morning. They had enough evidence to confront him directly. Still, the waiting was excruciating. Every knock at the door made her jump. Every ring of the phone sent her pulse racing. Finally, just as the sun began to dip below the horizon, headlights appeared in the driveway. The man stood by the window, glancing outside suspiciously. "Who's here?" he asked sharply, turning to her. Before she could answer, there was a firm knock at the door. Her heart leapt into her throat, but she forced herself to stay calm. "I'll get it," she said evenly, stepping forward. When she opened the door, relief washed over her. Standing there were 2 police officers accompanied by her best friend, who had promised to be nearby for support. One of the officers held up a badge. "We need to speak with you both," he said, his tone professional but kind. The man immediately tensed, his expression hardening. "What's going on?" he demanded, stepping closer. "This is private property." The officer ignored him, addressing the mom instead. "Ma'am, we've reviewed the information you provided. We believe it's in your best interest to come with us now." Her knees nearly buckled with relief, but she managed to nod. Turning to Ethan, she gestured for him to follow her. "Come on, sweetheart, we're leaving." The man lunged toward her, grabbing her arm. "You can't do this," he shouted, his voice rising. "You don't know what you're throwing away." But the officers were quick to intervene, pulling him back. "Sir, please remain calm," one of them said firmly. "You're under arrest for suspicion of fraud and other charges." As they led him away, he continued shouting, hurling accusations and threats. But none of it mattered anymore. The mom wrapped her arms around Ethan, holding him tightly as they watched the scene unfold. Tears streamed down her face, but for the first time in weeks, they were tears of relief. Her best friend stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You did it," she said softly. "You're safe now." For a long moment, the mom simply stood there, letting the reality sink in. The nightmare was over, or at least, it was beginning to fade. As the officers escorted the man to their car, she turned to Ethan, kneeling down to look him in the eye. "We're okay now," she told him, her voice steady despite the emotion swirling inside her. "First thing tomorrow, we'll call Grandma and tell her everything. Maybe she can come visit us for a few days." Ethan's lips curved into the smallest smile. "Yeah, that sounds nice." They stood there together, watching as the police car drove away, its red and blue lights fading into the distance. For the first time in what felt like forever, the air felt lighter. It wasn't just the end of a dangerous chapter. It was the start of something new. And though the road ahead might not always be easy, they would face it together, stronger than ever. The days following that chaotic evening were a blur of emotions, relief, exhaustion, and a lingering sense of disbelief. The mom and Ethan spent most of their time at home, slowly piecing their lives back together. It wasn't easy. The weight of what they had been through hung over them like a shadow, but with each passing day, the fear began to fade, replaced by a quiet determination to move forward. Ethan was quieter than usual, often retreating to his room or sitting by the window, staring outside. His mom noticed the change immediately. She knew he was processing everything in his own way, but she also worried about him. One afternoon, as they sat together on the couch, she gently nudged him. "Hey, champ, how are you feeling?" He shrugged, avoiding her gaze. "I don't know. Kinda weird, I guess." "Weird how?" she asked softly, giving him space to open up. I didn't think it would feel this way," he admitted after a pause. "I'm glad it's over, but sometimes I still feel scared, like maybe he'll come back." Her heart ached hearing those words. Pulling him close, she hugged him tightly. "Listen to me," she said firmly, though her voice trembled slightly. "He's not coming back. We're safe now, okay? You did something incredibly brave. You trusted your instincts when no one else did. That took so much courage, sweetheart. And because of you, we got out before anything bad happened. Ethan looked up at her, his eyes wide. Do you really think I'm brave? I know you're brave, she replied, smiling through tears. You saved us, Ethan. Never forget that. That conversation seemed to lift some of the heaviness from his shoulders. Over the next few days, he started to return to his old self, laughing more, playing with his toys, and even teasing her about burning toast during breakfast. Watching him heal gave her hope. They had been through something unimaginable, but together they were finding their way back to normalcy. Meanwhile, the authorities continued their investigation. The man, whose real name turned out to be completely different from what he'd told her, was linked to several other cases involving fraud and manipulation. Some of his former partners came forward, sharing stories eerily similar to hers. One woman described how he had convinced her to sell her house and transfer all the money into an account he controlled, only to vanish shortly after. Another spoke of waking up one morning to find him gone, along with nearly all her savings. Hearing these accounts made her stomach churn. How many others had fallen victim to his schemes? How close had she and Ethan come to becoming another statistic? These questions haunted her, but they also reinforced her decision to speak out. When the police asked if she'd be willing to testify against him, she agreed without hesitation. If sharing her story could help prevent someone else from being hurt, then it was worth it. In the weeks that followed, life began to settle into a new rhythm. Friends and family rallied around them, offering support in ways both big and small. Her best friend stayed by her side, helping her navigate legal proceedings and ensuring she didn't have to face anything alone. Even distant relatives reached out, expressing shock and outrage over what had happened. Their messages reminded her that she wasn't isolated, that there were people who cared deeply about her and Ethan. One of the most comforting moments came when her mom arrived for an extended visit. From the moment she stepped through the door, her warmth and love filled the house. She cooked hearty meals, played board games with Ethan, and listened patiently whenever her daughter needed to talk. Having her mother there felt like a balm to wounds that were still healing. As time went on, the mom found herself reflecting on everything that had happened. There were moments when guilt crept in. Why hadn't she seen the warning signs sooner? Why had she let herself be so easily charmed? But instead of dwelling on regret, she chose to focus on gratitude. Gratitude for Ethan's courage, for her friend's unwavering support, and for the second chance they'd been given. She also made a promise to herself, to trust her instincts moving forward. For years, she had pushed aside doubts and ignored red flags, telling herself she was being paranoid or overly cautious. Now she realized how important it was to listen to that inner voice, especially when it came to protecting her family. One evening, as she tucked Ethan into bed, he looked up at her with a sleepy smile. "Mom, do you think things will always be okay now?" She smoothed his hair back, her heart swelling with love. "I can't promise that nothing bad will ever happen again," she said honestly, "but I can promise that we'll always stick together. No matter what, we've got each other's backs." "Okay," he murmured, closing his eyes. "Good night, Mom." "Good night, my brave boy," she whispered, kissing his forehead. She turned off the light and closed his bedroom door. She allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. The road ahead wouldn't always be smooth. They still had challenges to face, fears to overcome, but they had already proven they could weather the storm. Together, they were stronger than anything life could throw at them. And as she walked back to the living room, she caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror. Gone was the uncertainty, the doubt, the fear. In its place stood a woman who had faced darkness head-on and emerged victorious, not just for herself, but for the little boy counting on her. She smiled softly, feeling a spark of hope ignite within her. Life wasn't perfect, and it never would be. But for the first time in a long while, she felt ready to embrace whatever came next.